In 2012, I bought a plane ticket to Australia to move, and I didn't get on the plane for 2 years. I had every excuse to keep pushing the ticket. My brothers needed me, the house needed renovating, timing wasn't right. There was a variety of reasons that I found to keep pushing the date. But actually, what was happening is that I was frozen. I really needed the change, but I also was scared shitless of making that big move, which meant that what I was used to was going to change completely, including my patterns of wanting to be a hero for everyone. And I had seen my dad and then my mom stick it out in marriages that were not good for them. And so I had this model that you just stick it out for family. At the same time, I was so numb with grief. I could feel the weight of the responsibilities. It was making me crumble inside. I became really depressed. Even though I was still functioning, I was going to work. I was supporting my brothers. I kept renovating the house. I was getting my little brother, or trying to get my little brother not to skip school. I was supporting my middle brother into going to university and helping him with his paperwork. All sorts of things that looked like I was functioning, but actually I was not. So today I want to talk to you about that kind of fear response, the freeze of response. It's the kind of response that shows up and you know you're in there when you know what you need to do, but you can't quite seem to actually get to do it. You're just stuck. And change feels like less of an adventure and more of a dreadful threat. And I want to share what actually helped me and what is helping a lot of my clients when they feel just as stuck as I was. And I want to share with you the tools that will help you move through this. And that's not the usual tools of, yeah, be strong, use your will and push through it. It's the tools that actually helped me later down the track. And I would have fast tracked things so much for me because I want you to get through your hump a little bit faster than I did. Change is not hard because you're weak or because you're lazy, but because your nervous system is doing its work. It's scanning for threats and doing everything to keep you safe. When we face big shifts, like a big move, like I did, ending a relationship, changing careers, anything new, your brain will actually scan the situation and decide whether it's safe or not. If there's no evidence that it is safe, if you have no prior history, it will assume it's not. If you have histories that says a similar situation wasn't safe, it will also say this new situation is not safe. So that's what the nervous system is actually here for. It's to protect you. And the freeze response is just another one of the fear responses. You usually hear of fight or flight, but freeze is a very important one too. And when it shows up, it can show up like procrastination, like not being able to take the steps you said you would, like not ticking the to-do list as you wished you would. And that's not that you're lazy. It's not that you're self-sabotaging. It's just that your nervous system knows or thinks that the situation you're in or that you want to get to isn't safe. Freeze response is just another one of those fear responses. You've probably heard of fight and flight, but there's also two more, and freeze is one of them. It's the immobilizing version of your fear response. It's a bit like being stuck in quicksand. You know you got to move, but no matter what you do, you just can't pull yourself out of it. And here's the thing, most advice for navigating change assumes that you're regulated, that you're capable of taking those steps, and that you're not in this state of being immobilized. It's not uncommon to hear advice that just says, feel the fear and do it anyway. And that sounds great in theory, but in practice, when your nervous system is telling you shut down, there's really not much you can do in the moment unless you regulate first. And so you have to work with the whole system before we can take those steps. Because you can take steps while being scared and in fear response, no matter which one. But generally, fear means that your ability to take sound decisions is actually quite limited. So you might take those steps that you think you need to take and realize later they were the wrong steps, or they were actually draining you in the process. And that's all a result of you not being able to first expand within, regulate your system so that you can find that calm, that spaciousness, and then take a step from there. And so the missing piece is always safety. You need a steady ground from which to leap from. If the ground feels shaky, either you won't leap or it'll be a very dodgy one. And to be fair, I had no idea that I was freezing when I bought the ticket and didn't hop on the plane for 2 years. I actually discovered that I was a freezer years later in the surf, facing a big wave and being completely stuck there and just getting dumped. But thinking of it later on, it was clear that there were a lot of series of events where I was actually freezing. And that time between 2012 and 2014, before I moved to Australia, was definitely one of them. So in 2012, I had already moved back for a year back to France from the Netherlands with my little brother who had come with me to the Netherlands to study. And so we came back to France because my studies were over and I realized that my other brothers still needed me. So we moved back. And a year later, I had decided to get a ticket to move to Australia because I had a sense that I really shouldn't stay there. In fact, in 2011, I started getting into the old pattern, the old way of doing things that I had learned from my mom, which is give, 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 be of service, forget yourself, and literally forget your own sense of safety and health. And so I immersed myself in trying to support my brothers, and I had no idea how to support myself. And so in 2012, I had finally finished my second master's degree. I had worked in the Netherlands. On the outside, it looked great. I was just a big sister coming back to France to help her siblings and to tidy things up. But on the inside, I was literally lost. I was so devoid of sensation. I had completely disconnected from myself and I kept pushing because that's what I had learned to do and because there was still things to do. There were bills to be paid. There was a roof to make sure I was staying over our head. I had to make sure that my brothers were fed. I mean, like anything that a single mother would do, really. And so I just pushed through like I had seen my mom do. And it led to the same result. I became depleted. I became depressed. I became lost. I would cry myself at night into bed, and that was just my routine. On the outside, everyone thought that I had it together. No one thought that I needed help until one day a friend's mom comes over and she sees me. She had already come a year before, but this time she comes back and she sees me and she gives me no option. She says, "You're going to pack a bag and you're going to come with me." And she must have seen that I was on my last thread. She must have seen that a few more months of this, and I might not be here to tell you this story today. She's the only one who saw through my mask. She's the only one who saw that I was playing the role of the fixer and I was struggling. She saw that I was holding it together to make sure that my brothers were safe, to make sure that everything was done to limit the pain that my brothers were feeling, because pain wasn't safe for me. If they suffered, I had failed. And if I had failed, I wasn't safe. And I couldn't let that happen. So let me tell you about the story of how I moved to Australia. In 2012, that was a year after I came back from the Netherlands, studying and working and taking care of my brother who had followed me because the situation at home back in Toulouse was actually unsafe for him and he needed to get out of that environment. So I took him with me, enrolled him in the International School of The Hague, and we made it work for a year together. I finished my second master's degree and I worked in parallel in Adidas at the time, drafting contracts. And it was really a great time of my life. But every time I visited, I would see that my other brothers were struggling. And so instead of continuing my work in the Netherlands, I decided to move back with my youngest brother back to France. And when I moved back, the house was a mess. My brothers seemed really lost. And my mom had made me promise to take care of my brothers. And so that's what I did. I already knew that I was going to get lost in it because before moving a second time to the Netherlands, I had spent a year in France where I had gone really badly into depression already. And I came back to the same setting. And just like before, people assumed that I had it all together. I mean, I was the lawyer who came back, but I just went on autopilot. I mean, my brothers were grieving. I was grieving too, but I didn't know what I was. I had completely shut down on that level. And so I was just functioning. I was just trying to get things done. I was trying to put the food on the table, get the bills paid so we kept a roof over our head, make sure that my brothers did the bare minimum to feel at least a little bit of health. I tried to make sure that my youngest brother wouldn't skip school, that the middle one would keep going with university. I mean, I was really involved in trying to make everything work, just like my mom had shown me. And look, it was tough. I mean, these were teenage boys and we had fights and it was really difficult. It was so emotionally hard to deal with not only teenagers, but grieving boys on top of my own stuff. I had to make it work. There was this promise that I had made that I would take care of my brothers, and my understanding of taking care of my brothers and taking care of people was a different understanding than the one that I have now, which is a lot more empowering for everyone involved. At the time, I thought that I needed to do things for them, to keep holding them, to keep holding their emotions for them so that they would not feel that pain, because pain felt dangerous for me. If they felt pain, that meant I failed. And if I failed, that meant I wasn't safe. And safety was the most important thing for me because growing up, none of us felt safe. It was so emotionally traumatic, but also physically traumatic in many ways. You know, the moves, the separations, the physical abuse, all sorts of things happened to us that made the situation very unsafe. And so for me, taking care of my brothers meant I needed to make sure they were safe. I needed to make sure that they were safe even from their own emotions, even from their own struggles. And that's basically how my mom raised us. And that was definitely not helpful. And so because it looked like I had it all together, no one came to help. I was doing this on my own, just like my mom had done. Only I didn't have the circle she had. She had a lot of really good friends that helped. I came back and I didn't have any of that. I found myself really isolated and pushing through and going to work to make sure that the bills were paid and doing all things to make sure that my brothers were at least a little bit okay. I was just playing out that role that I had learned as a child to be a fixer, to make sure that everyone was feeling settled, to make sure that their emotions were tended to so that there would be no outbursts. Didn't work, of course, because my brothers, teenagers and grieving, we had fights, of course, but that's what I thought I needed to do. And that's the role that I had played my whole childhood, trying to temporize my mom's emotional fluctuations. And so that's what I kept repeating. And at the time, let me tell you, my dad and I were not that close because I had not talked to him for many years before. And we had just connected maybe 6 years earlier. So we're not that close. But even him, who didn't know me that well, said, you know, Sonia, you need to get on a plane. You need to go. It doesn't matter where you go, but you need to go. And you know that I heard it. I heard it, but I didn't really hear it because it was too hard for me to acknowledge the fact that I needed to abandon my brothers. And whenever I say that, the word that comes is children. I think of them as my children still to this day when I talk about my brothers. And I had made a promise to my mom. A few months before she died, we found ourselves on a plane and I literally thought she was going to die. And as she was struggling on that plane, and when we landed, we went straight to the hospital. But as she was struggling on that plane, she made me promise to take care of my brothers. And so when my dad said, you know, hop on the plane, I was like, sounds like a good idea, but I can't. I'm stuck here. And so I kept pushing because I was stuck between that sense of duty and freeze response. I was completely shut down by the immensity of the responsibilities and the promise and all of the things that I had to do on top of figuring out what I needed to do for my own career. And I was feeling so guilty with the idea of abandoning my brothers, of letting them be here and going. I didn't know how they were going to survive, even though by that stage, in 2012, they were all adults. I mean, young adults, granted, but adults. And so I found every excuse possible to just postpone that flight. And I kept calling and telling them, hey, can we push to that date? And can we push to that date? To the point that in 2013, they were like, no, we can't push to that date. If you want to keep pushing, we're going to have to cancel the flight. So I had to cancel it because I still was not able to bring myself to move, to take that step, to hop on that plane. And in 2014, I crashed. I really crashed. I had kept pushing for 2 years straight and kept doing the things. And I had gone to a state of forgetting myself that was so deep that I became so depressed. I was literally a ghost of myself. And a year before, a friend's mom visited and she said, you know, you can always come to my place. And I was like, yeah, thanks. That's fine. But when she came back in 2014 and she looked at me, she didn't give me a choice. She said, Sonia, you're going to pack a bag and you're going to come with me. And by that state, I was so depleted. I had become such a shadow of myself that I didn't fight anything. I didn't even talk. I just walked to the room, grabbed a few things, put them in a bag, and I think I hopped in her car. I don't even remember how I got to her house. All I know is I got to her house and I slept for what feels like 3 months. I don't remember waking up. I don't remember eating. I don't remember going to the toilet or showering. I just remember falling asleep and waking up 3 months later. And then one day I wake up, I walk downstairs. It's the morning and I make pancakes. I make Sylvie some pancakes. And it was time to restart. It was time to come back. That was the first sign, those pancakes. So I tried to rebuild, I tried to change the dynamic because I still had work to do. I still had this house to renovate and I still had my brothers and I still had all these things. I thought, well, maybe if I change the dynamic, maybe if I change the environment. So I got a flat in Toulouse, 10 kilometers away from my mom's house where my brothers still lived. And I would do the back and forth to renovate. Very quickly, I realized this is not going to work. I kept doing everything. I kept pushing like I did before, and I knew where that was heading, and I was not prepared to go back there. My brothers were still leaning on me. I still had to do all the things. And I was still so tempted to try and fix the pain for them. I just did not know how to lose myself. I didn't have the blueprint. I didn't have the model. I didn't understand help as a really supportive way of helping. I did not have those concepts. And so I realized, look, clearly I can't do it in this environment. I can't do it anymore. And that's when I finally found a way to scrap money together and get on that plane in 2014. I left on the 1st of September. It was a Monday, and I arrived 2 days later in Australia. And so coming to Australia was really not a dream. I had actually never thought of coming to Australia before. The only reason why I picked Australia is because it was far away. And I knew from my experience living in the Netherlands that even if I was only a 2-hour flight away from my brothers, I would still fly to try and help. So I thought I need to go as far as possible so that I'm not tempted to help. I need to go as far as possible so that I have to find myself in a new dynamic and they have to stand up on their own without me. Going to Australia was the ultimate act of survival for me, not an adventure. And here's what I wish that I had known then, and I want to gift to you today. Hopefully it helps you if you're going through any kind of situation that's hopefully not as drastic as mine, but still might put you in a freeze response. Your freeze response is not your enemy, it's information. My 2-year freeze in France and the depression that followed was not weakness. It was the learned patterns and the big change that my nervous system was not ready to accommodate for because it felt too scary. My nervous system knew that I was not safe enough to make that move. And on top of that, I had no idea what it would look like to be on the other side of the world and not being able to support my brothers. And so in doing that, not being able to fulfill my self-appointed role of the hero, of the fixer. And my nervous system was right. I wasn't safe. I wasn't safe internally during that time, and I wasn't safe externally either. My whole world was crumbling because falling asleep for 3 months, my friends, does get your job lost. And I don't even know how they survived for 3 months without me, to be honest. To this day, I have no idea, but they did. I wasn't safe and I didn't have the tools to regulate myself. And choosing another pattern, not only I had no idea that I could do that, but even if I had thought of it, it would have felt like death, literally. As kids, my mom, when she was going down the drain on her emotional roller coasters, when she was in the very low moments and she had enough because she couldn't cope, she would tell us horrible things. And one of the things that she would say was, I'll give you to social services and they'll separate all of you and you'll be better off without them. And so for me, the idea of being separated from my brothers or abandoning them felt like the ultimate death. Because when you're a kid, not being with your parents, actually, in your system, is equated to death. So, of course, I would have been freezing. Of course. And without knowing all the inner works that was happening without me and without the regulation system that I have learned over time, it was just impossible for me to just pick up and go. And I had to crash to finally find stillness. 3 months of it. My system was like, okay, girl, I can't continue like this. We need to stop you. Where this is going, you're not going to make it. And so what I've learned with this is, first of all, you can't think your way through a freeze response. You really have to understand what is causing you to feel unsafe and work with it. If it's not due to a core wound, you're able to regulate with simple tools like breathwork and meditation. But if it is in any way, shape, or form relating to an old childhood trauma, a core wound, then you're going to have to look into that. Because that is going to keep you feeling unsafe, no matter how much breath work you do. You have to create that sense of safety, that steady ground under your feet before you can take those steps. You need to feel safe enough in your body first. And so, yes, in some occasions, action will help you move through the lack of confidence. That is accurate. But that's only true if you are just lacking confidence, if you're scared but not in freeze state. When you're truthfully in a fear response state, that is the freeze one, you're going to need to do a little bit more than just will your way through it. Action is often not enough. And as I said earlier, yeah, you can take actions when you're scared. Absolutely, you can. But they're not always sound decisions. Because the part of the brain that leads you to take these decisions is not the conscious thinking part of your brain. It's not your prefrontal cortex from which you should make the best decisions. No, that's the part of your brain that's an automated system that will make you decisions based on what it gathers if it's never been in this situation. And the decisions are made much faster because the midbrain is essentially the part of your brain that helps you take decisions when you're in survival mode, when you really need to act fast. And what happens when you're in a fear state is that you kind of get a really focused, narrow view. You can't think laterally. You don't see the full picture. And that's why it can lead to really unhealthy and unsupportive decisions. And now you might think, yeah, Sonia, but that's just your story. But no, it's not just my story. I have countless examples of people I worked with. And one of them is Antoine. Antoine had gone through something similar in terms of the internal state of response, of fear response. He became frozen when he realized that he needed to take actions to be able to stay in Australia. He's French, to stay in Australia after getting the letter saying he was going to get kicked out. And he was in Australia. He had this woman that he really loved, and he didn't manage to take the steps. And he ended up having to go back to France. And so he contacted me from France, telling me his whole story. And not understanding why he couldn't take the steps in Australia, and not understanding why, even now that he's in France, knowing that he wanted to go back, wanted to, get the job, get the woman back, get his life back, he just couldn't take the steps. He didn't understand why he was so stuck. He just couldn't move. It felt impossible. And so we didn't start with the visa situation. We started with the nervous system. He was in the, I know what I want to do. I kind of know the steps that I need to take, but I just can't do it. So we work on helping him regulate. We worked with the breath. We worked with the body. He needed movement as well because fear response is very much connected to the body. It's a physiological state. And so in some occasions, depending on what you're going through, certain movements, certain exercise patterns can help you close the loop of fear and step out of fear response. So we worked on all of that, the breath, the body, slowing down enough so that he could feel what was happening actually inside him and start working on that, understanding what the situation brought in him that made it so hard for him to take those steps. And one of the favorite things that I did with him is a work of reconnecting with joy, because that's another way to work with your nervous system. Not necessarily to get you out of the freeze response by doing the things that calm you down, but give you a gentle, lighter type of excitement, and joy is one of them. When you're frozen, you actually lose access to your desires. You lose access to what you really want. You forget what it is that you want. And so we had to bring that back. And what we did is that I got him to do things he really enjoyed and really do it religiously. Have that part of his regulation process. We worked on increasing his joy meter, and it worked. Coupled with all the other exercises, he ended up being able to stand better, to feel calmer, to start thinking of the steps, and to take action. And the result? It was amazing. He ended up having his visa, moving back to Australia, claiming his woman back, and she let him, and he found the job that he really wanted to do, and found a house, and life just started working for him. So what does it actually look like in practice if you are in a situation where you feel like you're stuck in quicksand? Remember, if you are frozen, if you're feeling like you're procrastinating, or you know the steps, you're not taking them, you're not lazy. You're not broken. You're not weak. You are just in survival mode. All you need to do is make safety your priority. Make sure that your system feels safe enough so that it can down-regulate so that you can take the steps. So first of all, recognize that you are freezing. And that's already going to help, because when you recognize an emotional situation, naming it actually helps you soften it. So saying, hey, looks like I'm in freeze response. My system is trying to keep me safe, will already bring safety in your system. Make sure that you regulate before that big action. Breathwork is super handy. A long exhale is your go-to, because when you do a long exhale, you tell your body, hey, I've got control. And a long exhale actually helps your nervous system settle. It helps activate your parasympathetic side of the nervous system, which is your rest and digest, which is the calm state. So breath is very, very useful. As I said earlier, if whatever you're going through is connected to an emotional situation, you might need to address that as well. But certainly start with the breath. The other things you can do, movement, going for a run. If you're angry, humming can be helpful. Shaking can be helpful. You can also use cold water exposure, and it doesn't have to be plunging in an ice bath. You can just put cold water on your neck or on your face. You just have to try things and see what works for you, because everyone's different and your reaction to tools might be different. And here's the thing, the goal is not to feel good, because if you are still in fear response, no matter how much calmer you are, if you are still in a situation that feels unsafe to your system, it won't feel good, but you will be able to be a little bit more present. Another thing that's super helpful, when you are going through a state of fear, very often your mind starts going faster and leading you to anxiety, creating situations in your mind that might not be realistic or real. So one thing that's super helpful is to ask yourself, is it true that if I go away and leave my brothers, they will die? I had the absolute proof that it was not going to happen. They had just spent 3 months without me. Is it true that if I wait 5 minutes to send that email, I'll be fired? You just have to look at the situation and assess whether that catastrophic thought is accurate or not. And that will force you to step back into conscious thinking, to look at what's happening. And one thing that can help is really to feel your surroundings. So feel your feet on the ground, listen to the sounds, do the five senses. You've probably heard of it. Just make sure you hear what's around you. Sense, feel, touch, smell. That helps bring you back to the present. You are here. You're alive. Your impeding death is not going to happen. And that's a good start. The other thing you can do, just like Antoine, reconnecting with joy. It is so helpful. Now, that's not going to be the first thing you do, because if you're properly scared, joy is going to be completely out of reach for you. But once you've done the first steps of down-regulating, joy can be helpful in accelerating the access to a calmer state, to a more joyful state, from which you'll make better decisions. To do at least one small thing that you know normally would make you happy, even if in the moment you might not feel that it makes you happy, but you know usually it does. Do that. Eventually you'll feel happy and joyful again, and that's going to help you massively. The other thing that's important is when we face big changes, especially if it's a change that we need to make happen for ourselves, it's easy to think of the big change, but actually, if you break it down, if you think of the next micro step, it'll be a lot easier for your system, a lot manageable. And one more thing that I can't emphasize enough, get support. Whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a friend, get support. If at least to bounce ideas with someone. It's always easier to take steps when we feel supported. It's always easier when someone can hold space and remind you that you're not broken, that there's nothing wrong with you, that you're just scared, and it's okay. There is a way out of that freeze state you're in. There is a way out of this immobility. And look, change never stops to happen. That's the one constant in life. Even me right now, I'm still navigating big changes. After coming back from Tunisia, I decided I want to move back to Europe. So I'm planning that move. And it's scary because it's actually the first time in my life that I make a big move out of just desire, not out of fear. And that is scary. I've never done that before. I've never chosen a big change just because I want to. It's the first time that actually I make a decision that is so big in my life just because it makes peaceful sense. And look, it's not because it makes peaceful sense that it's easy. I still have to push myself through it. I still have to navigate the fear, because to get to the next stage where I hit my personal and professional goals, I am getting triggered, you guys. I'm getting so triggered. That's the story for another time. But I do have to use the same techniques of down-regulating. It's okay. I know how to regulate myself. I know how to handle it. And so there's a lot of threads right now that I'm pulling on, but I am supported. I have my therapist. I have my coach. I have my own sense of knowing all the techniques that I have used over time. And I feel like it's all going to be okay. Yes, I'm scared, but I am not frozen, because I know what's happening and I know how to deal with it. You see, change doesn't stop being hard unless you become a very elevated being. You will, from time to time, or most of the time, depending on where you're at in your spiritual evolution, still push against change. You don't really get to graduate from being scared of change, but your relationship with it actually shifts, just like mine did. If you learn those practices, if you show yourself that you can do it over and over again, eventually it becomes second nature. And so if you are in a state of freeze, if you're in a situation that's extremely scary for you and you don't know how to move on from it, if you don't know how to take the steps that you know you must take, I want you to remember, please be kind to yourself. You are not broken. You're not weak. You're not lazy. You just have a system that's working perfectly well, that's trying to protect you. All you need to do is understanding it, communicate with it, give it what it needs to bring that sense of safety that will allow you to take those steps. And if it means finding support, go for it. And if it means looking for all the tools, go for it. You just have to find what's right for you. If this resonates, I really would love to hear from you. I'd love to know what change you're navigating right now. What's going on for you? And I really also want you to know that you don't have to do it alone. So if you feel like being supported and going deeper into this work, the Inner Power Mentorship might be exactly what you need. Have a look in the show notes. The link will be there.